floors to seek shelter, and you can see Sierra Highway completely lined with deputies who are still arriving on scene, guys.
Scary situation, and we understand that sheriff deputy was shot in the shoulder. Apparently he's going to be okay. Any other word of anyone else was grazed or how many shots were fired?
At this point, that was the last of the gunfire. However, this is being treated as an active shooter situation. I mentioned that they're airlifting those tactical teams. Those guys are going to land here pretty shortly, I would imagine, in the baseball field behind the it's going to be the Antelope Valley Adventist School, which is right down the block. There are a number of municipal buildings. There's a library right next door, and for all intents and purposes, this entire neighborhood is under lockdown right now. So the field where they're going to land here, Air Rescue 5 is on the way up here, is right near the bottom of your screen right there. We expect to see that helicopter landing very shortly, and that will be the next step because they already have officers ready to make entry into some of the floors of that apartment building. I should also mention, while that is an apartment building, from what we've been able to tell, there's also a mental health facility next door as well. So a number of businesses and buildings involved here, and this, like as I mentioned, is in the process of being surrounded. So once again, I want to tell you, we're right north, just north, I should say, of Lancaster Boulevard, just south of Jackman Street, in between Beach Avenue and Sierra Highway. That's where we're looking right there. You can, once again, see the sheriff's station near the top. That's where the bullets were flying towards, and the apartment complex near the bottom. That's where the shots were coming from. So that's what they're dealing with. They are trying to conceal the location of all of the deputies who are on scene, and that's why we're keeping this really wide shot so those guys can get into position and do what they've got to do.
Wow, this is really incredible. So just looking at from your vantage point, Chris, because that was really descriptive of what you were just saying. So we're looking at that white sort of U-shaped building. It's an apartment building, but it's also a mental health facility as well. Is that what you're saying?
So the U-shaped building on top is the apartment building, and then there's a more rectangular building just basically right next door to it. Right there, we can zoom in. I think that's the Antelope Valley Enrichment Services Center. It's a mental health facility, and that building is also under lockdown. So it's next to an apartment complex where all this is playing out.
Well, these sheriff deputies have their work cut out for them because that is quite a massive building. I'd imagine they're going to go for that part that is closest to the sheriff's station first, but they have a lot of buildings to go through, a lot of rooms to go through.
The focus right now is on the side of the building with the balconies, which is the side that we're looking at right now. That's the south-facing side of that apartment building. They're trying to clear the hallways, and they are zeroing in on each and every one of those windows facing south where that gunfire was coming from. Obviously, this shooter chose an elevated position on the third or maybe the fourth floor of that apartment complex, which is facing the sheriff's station, and without speculating too much, it appears was aiming in the direction of law enforcement officers in the parking lot of that sheriff's station.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When you start looking at this, it looks it seems very calculating, and I can only imagine what it was like for any of the sheriff's department employees or anyone, because it's actually a pretty large parking lot there, and to hear the shots being fired, and you know, a little while ago we saw that image, you know, I don't know if we were showing it, but Ellen and I saw it, where the people were hiding behind cars.
Yes, exactly.
So I don't know how if people ended up just kind of sheltering in place in their cars or under their cars, or I can't imagine.
And that's what we understand, that some people are actually in their cars. Because you have to feel like you're just so exposed there in the middle of that huge parking lot. That must be a very scary situation for if anybody's stuck in that parking. Yeah, that's true.
So
yeah, I can't say that they were going car to car, but the people that were identified we saw a number of deputies basically running through the parking lot. One deputy providing cover with the gun trained on the apartment building, while other deputies were looking for other cars that might have had people hiding in the back seat. Civilians that work inside that sheriff's station hiding in their cars. Once again, the initial report as we were on our way up here, there were witnesses that saw people running from the crime lab, which is in the back of the sheriff's station. And so we would imagine by this point that sheriff's station has probably been evacuated by now, as are other buildings, quite frankly. In this area, there's a church right next door. It's the Sacred Heart Church, I believe. That has been evacuated. And as I mentioned, the library next door is also under lockdown.
Yes. that is quite a feat that they're going to have to undertake. Hopefully, there's just one person, and hopefully they capture him soon. It's going to be a tough one, though.
Well, what's interesting is, we can kind of surmise just based on the accuracy, if in fact this was an intentional target, presumably shooting from that apartment complex to a deputy in that parking lot, you've got to imagine we may be dealing with somebody with a long rifle, not the type of shot that you'd be able to make with a handgun, for example. But those are all things that they are thinking about right now. Obviously, they have no idea who this person is, as far as we can tell. This is still, as we mentioned, a very active situation, and a number of people still inside that apartment building. Again, one would imagine, because we have not seen them self-evacuating. We haven't seen any crowds of people coming from the apartment building. We just know that they are planning at some point to make entry into those hallways and begin clearing the building very methodically until they find that shooter. But this person could be hiding out anywhere in that building. I can tell you from up here, it appears to be a very large building, and obviously tons of places to hide if in fact that's what he's doing.
Wow, you just kind of think about the sheriff's department. You sort of feel like you're a sitting duck just by the vantage point that you see right there, because you can shoot at any person in a car, and unfortunately in our current climate, everything is now suddenly being considered. Everyone's safety, these targets, it just seems unbelievable that someone would possibly be targeting law enforcement.
Right. And since we haven't heard any more shots fired, he's obviously, or she is obviously trying to hide out. And that could be a big undertaking, because they can hide anywhere.
Anywhere.
Closets, in the little attic space.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, we noticed there's also an underground parking garage in that building as well. So a lot of parking space here. You have the parking lot for the sheriff's station. You have a parking lot in that U building, which is right behind the mental health facility. And then there's another parking lot on the west side there, on the west side of Beach Avenue. But you can see they've got all of these entrances and exits covered now. So presumably they've been able to contain this to this apartment complex. Certainly they were able to move into position very quickly, obviously, with the sheriff's station right next door there. There were plenty of deputies nearby and able to lock down this building, or at least lock down the exits. So again, we are making the assumption that they are making, which is that that person, that shooter, is still inside the building.
Yeah, and Chris, obviously we're seeing some road closures here. So just if anyone needs to get around this area looks like it's on full lockdown. There is no getting through the Sierra Highway at West Lancaster Boulevard. That area seems shut down as police try to investigate. As you know, obviously this is undercover, or an unmarked law enforcement vehicle going inside there.
Yeah, and that area that is under lockdown, where traffic is prohibited now, would include that school that I mentioned, which I believe has halted pickup, is what I heard. So we'll try and confirm that with our assignment desk, but it's going to be the Antelope Valley Adventist School, which is right next to where that landing zone is. That's the school right there. They were looking for school buses. Presumably, school would be letting out, if it hasn't already, and I'm not clear. It looks like a private school, so I'm not sure what time this school happens to let out. But that would be in this zone right along Kettering Street, which is partially blocked off, partially due to the shooting, and then also partially because they're waiting for that huge Air Rescue 5 helicopter to land right next to Jackman Street here in just a few moments.
And this situation could certainly paralyze that entire area for hours. I mean, it could take a long time.
Right. This isn't a typical barricade where they just have to clear a house or a small building. We're dealing with a rather large apartment complex where, they really are not clear exactly which window the shots came from, but by now he could be anywhere. As you mentioned, lots of places to hide, attic space, apartments, closets, parking structures underneath the building, and that type of thing. With people living in that building, you've got to worry about the potential for a hostage situation developing here. We just don't know at this point.
And Colleen had a good point. He could be hiding in plain sight. He could have easily got rid of the weapon and be, watching around like he's...
Yep, absolutely. We don't know if he's a resident or not, or if he made his way into this building some other way illegally. But if he was trespassing, we don't know. He can very easily blend in when they do eventually make entry into the building. So nobody will be leaving that building anytime soon. It'll only be law enforcement that begins doing I would imagine they'll do a grid search through that building and go apartment to apartment, locking down each hallway and then narrowing down their suspect.
Right, and if he did get rid of the weapon, who's to say how are they going to identify him and verify that it's? That's going to be a tough one. An unusual circumstance here.
It's going to be a tough one, and for that reason, we imagine that this entire neighborhood will be locked down for hours. We are planning on being here all evening long because this situation is not going to be wrapped up anytime soon. There's just virtually no chance of that. The biggest concern right now is that you have an armed suspect who has shown a willingness to fire at law enforcement, which means he is a desperate individual. He's capable of anything. Obviously a high-powered weapon in there, and at this point, the good news is that the only shots that have been fired so far were those initial reports of the shooting which injured that deputy. There has not been any further report of shooting since then, but still an extremely active situation here, an extremely active search going on, and additional deputies now moving into position as we speak.
Well, and thankfully that sheriff is going to be okay. I understand he was conscious, he was breathing, he was just hit in the shoulder. So thank goodness for that.
I should also mention that the tactical officers that are on the ground down there, as they continue to stand guard around this neighborhood and around that apartment building, are dealing with extreme temperatures up here. The temperature outside is about 105 degrees. We can feel it here in Air 7 HD, a very hot afternoon up here in the desert, and not helping the situation at all. We've even seen officers bringing containers of water to some of the tactical officers that are literally lining this block here. But needless to say, very, very hot conditions.
Yeah, they're certainly going to need a lot of water, and because they have to wear that protective gear as well. And so it's going to be a long day for those officers. You got to feel for them. And if anyone's still holed up in their car, is sheltering in place there, feel for them too, because they can't leave their car running. And it is the hottest day of the week, of course.
Yeah, they're trying to secure that south side of the building. And once they have enough firepower in place where they can say that the shooter is not looking out one of those windows, I would imagine the next order of business, which we've already kind of had an indication, would be to find any civilians left in that parking lot and then clear that entire parking lot out just to make sure that nobody else is hurt here, because that's where the fire was, or the gunfire was pointing towards. And the only injury that we know of for sure is that deputy who did suffer a minor shoulder injury, a gunshot wound. He was able to run into the fire station, which is, again, just a block away from the sheriff's station. But as far as other civilians, we just don't know. The only injury count that we have at this point is that one deputy. But they're trying to just make sure that whoever was shooting out of the south side is no longer in any of those windows. And then they'll, again, look at other windows on the other three sides of the building. But again, a complex U-shaped building, as we mentioned, with plenty of space to hide.
Yeah, it's been one of the larger apartment buildings that we've seen, so this is really not your typical barricade situation for sure. We're going to go off digital, but you can join us for ABC7 Eyewitness News at 4 p.m. David Ono and I will be covering this with Chris Christie in Air 7 HD, and we'll have to keep on top of this and see how this progresses.
Yeah, clearly, this is going to be a story that we're going to stay with for quite a while. It's still developing. And as a result, we are trying to get all the details as we get them, and we'll give them to you. But stand by, switch over to ABC7, or stay right here. All right, we begin with breaking news. At Lancaster, a sheriff's deputy shot in the shoulder, and this happened after a shooter opened fire at the Lancaster Sheriff's Station. Hello, I'm David Ono.
And I'm Ellen Leva. It happened just about an hour ago, and officials say the deputy was conscious and breathing, so he's going to be okay. A perimeter has been set up, and the search has been underway for the shooter. It appears to focus on the nearby apartment building, and we're going to bring you all the latest all afternoon long. We're going to stay on top of this story.
All right, and I think we're going to go to Chris Christie right now, who has been covering the situation. They have stayed on this story since about a little before 3:30, covering on ABC7.com, now back on ABC7. Chris, what's the latest in that half hour? What has transpired?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and recap what we know so far. It was a very frantic situation here along Sierra Highway. Sierra and Lancaster is where the LA County Sheriff's Station is located, but the gunfire appears to have come from that apartment building, that U-shaped building right there in the center of your screen. Apparently a shooter on one of the elevated floors, maybe the third or possibly the fourth floor, was shooting out of a side south-facing window towards that parking lot there and hit a sheriff's deputy. At least one sheriff's deputy was able to walk away with a gunshot wound, walk himself into the fire station, which is only a block away. There was pandemonium in that parking lot. People were hiding out. Some may still be in their cars as we speak. There were also people fleeing the sheriff's station itself, civilian employees inside the sheriff's station fleeing the crime lab, which is near the rear of the building as well. And now this entire neighborhood is surrounded by LA County Sheriff's deputies, SEB teams, Special Enforcement Bureau, which is the SWAT team in the county's jurisdiction. They are making their way up here. There's an entire team that's about to be airlifted and dropped off just about 5 minutes out. It's going to be dropped off about a block away at a nearby school, where they will unload, suit up, and then enter that apartment building where there is a frantic search about to go on down the hallways and apartment by apartment in that apartment complex. I believe it's called the Arbor Field Luxury Apartment Complex, not to be confused with the mental health facility, which is adjacent. So that rectangular building there is a mental health facility. It's right next to the sheriff's station and immediately next door to the apartment complex in question here. So it does sound like they've been able to clear those south-facing windows that you're looking at on this side of the building. That'll allow them to clear the parking lot and any individuals who may be hiding out in their car, but they still have a large building for this shooter to hide, and we don't know what that suspect looks like. Whether he's going to try and blend in with the rest of the people who live inside this building, we'll just have to wait and see as law enforcement enters that building. But they have their work cut out for them without able to. I'm sorry, guys. Go ahead.
Stand by, Chris. Thank you for the update, by the way. We're going to go back to Chris in just a second. But we have the mayor of Lancaster, Mayor R. Rex Parrish, who is with us on the phone right now. Mayor, first of all, thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out to talk to us. I understand that you actually spent some time with a deputy who was shot in the emergency room. What can you tell us about what you witnessed and how he's doing?
Well, he was in a lot of pain, but he's going to be okay. You know, we expect him to return to duty at some point.
Well, thank heavens for that. Mayor, what can you tell us about this particular building? Is there some sort of alert system that you send out to your residents, or how do they know to shelter in place?
How do they know what's in place?
Yeah, is that what they're doing right now?
Well, right now they've cleared the area around it. We've got a virtual army here at the Lancaster, and they think he's still in the building.
All right. Unfortunately, the connection's a little bit tricky, but I understand what you're saying. As for the deputy who was shot, did he tell you many details about what happened to him, how this all transpired?
No, I was the least of his concerns.
Right. I can get that. I understand that. Okay, when it comes to the citizens of Lancaster, what's your advice to them on what's happening right now?
Well, you know, it's inevitable. We knew this was a dangerous facility. We knew that they were importing a lot of mentally ill people up through that facility, and stay away from it. It's the best we can tell people at this point.
I think we heard you right. I'm so sorry for the connection. We apologize about that. We're going to try to get that a better connection, perhaps. But we understand you said it was the facility itself has dangerous people, or what did?
The facility itself is for mentally ill people. They bring them up from the downtown LA. They house them here, and it's they built it right next door to the sheriff's station. It was the height of idiocy.
All right. Yeah, Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. This is Mayor R. Rex Parrish, Mayor of Lancaster, where this situation is taking place. He also ran to the emergency room, spent some time with the deputy who was shot, said the deputy is in a lot of pain. But Luckily or thankfully that we're getting some information that says the deputy will survive his wounds, but nevertheless he has been shot, we believe, in the shoulder. So that was Mayor R. Rex Parris from Lancaster. In the meantime, we're continuing to cover the situation. A meticulous search is about to get underway as they continue to search for the shooter. The scary thing is, Ellen, this shooting took place and nobody really has seen much of that shooter since that happened. And he was so brazen as to go basically to the Lancaster Sheriff's Office and open fire.
Right. And we don't know, if he's hiding out or if he's trying to blend in with the other people that live in that building. So it's going to be a tricky situation there. We also know a lot of perimeter has been set up, a lot of closures taking place north of Lancaster Avenue, south of Jackson Street, and west of Sierra Highway. You stay clear of this area, obviously, but Chris Christie's been covering, and he's seen that perimeter taking place and more deputies showing up. Chris?
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, we do believe that deputies have actually been able to enter the building, despite the fact that the SEB units are still on their way over here, less than a couple minutes away. They do have units inside the building. That's good news. Here comes Air Rescue 5. It's got a whole team of tactical officers on board that's going to be dropped off at the school just about a couple of blocks away from that apartment complex where the shooting took place, and they will be suiting up and assisting in that search momentarily here. So help has been on the way. There are additional Bearcat units that are making their way up here from Los Angeles into the Antelope Valley. Lots of resources in place already. Many more resources on their way up here. So they are going to be prepared for the long haul here. This is an extended operation which could take hours. I suspect it will take hours before they can really clear that building and say for 100% that the situation is contained and that everybody is safe. Again, we haven't even seen any sign of people trying to evacuate the apartment building yet. So one has to imagine that there are still lots of residents inside that apartment building who hopefully by now have an idea of what's going on. Hopefully they're watching TV, they're online, and understand that the building is on lockdown right now.
Right, as we continue to watch this helicopter landing, and I guess, Chris, as you were mentioning, this is probably the SEB team arriving on the scene, a very highly qualified, highly trained SWAT unit with the LA Sheriff's Department that is one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world. So these guys, they are highly trained for this situation. Nevertheless, so we're dealing with a great deal of space that they're going to have to go through. The SWAT team itself is not that big. I believe it's somewhere around 40 members of the Sheriff's Department. It's a very competitive team to get onto, and once you're on, you've got to hang on for dear life. There are some tough requirements to stay on the SWAT team, but they're very, very good law enforcement officers, so they know what to do in this situation, but they're going to probably need as many of them as possible in order to go through this entire area. It's a huge area that we are dealing with, looking for the shooter. Chris, I haven't heard a whole lot of talk about it. I know that you mentioned some, but is there speculation what kind of weapon this gunman used?
I was speculating a little bit earlier just based on the facts that we know, but unfortunately there was no eyewitness that saw the suspect as far as we know, or at least no description that's been sent out. So we don't know if this was a long weapon or a short weapon, but based on the proximity between where that shooter is believed to have been shooting from, that window on the 3rd or 4th floor, and where that deputy was shot behind the sheriff's station, you're talking about well over 100 yards, which would lead me to believe, and again, this is speculation on my part, but would lead me to believe that this person is, first of all, trained and has access to a long weapon with some fairly high accuracy, to say the least, assuming he was indeed targeting those officers and trying to pick off those deputies behind that sheriff's station, which is right there. So you can see the distance between the sheriff's station and the apartment building. I have to say at least 100 yards, maybe even more. From where that deputy was shot. We don't know exactly where. We know it was on the north edge of the parking lot. There's a helipad in the middle. But just based on those facts alone, one would presume this is a heavily armed individual.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're looking on the right-hand side. That U-shaped building is the apartment complex. And then right now you're focusing on the left-hand side. That is the Sheriff's Department, correct?
Right, the Sheriff's Department on the left and the U-shaped apartment building right there entering the frame, right there in the center of your screen. So it's got its own parking lot in between there, in between the U-shaped building and then that mental health facility that the mayor mentioned. And then you have all of the rest of that parking space to the south, which I believe belongs to the Sheriff's Department. And then you have another parking lot just to the west on the right side, which is the Sacred Hearts Catholic Church, which is also on lockdown as well. And just to the south of that is the library, where there was some pandemonium, but we believe everybody is safe there. It's a couple of blocks away from the shooting, but also in this neighborhood. And I think everything north of Lancaster and west of Sierra Highway right now is basically on lockdown, including the school where that helicopter just landed.
And that shooter has so many options to hide out. They also have an underground parking garage in that apartment complex.
So that apartment complex...
there's a parking garage... Yeah, in that apartment complex, and we noticed earlier, we're not going to show that at the moment for the safety of the officers on the ground, but every entrance and exit to that apartment complex has been blocked. So we can assume at this point that the situation is fairly contained, while still very volatile and very active, and there's a shooter on the loose and a search taking place inside that building. The situation appears to be contained to that apartment building that we're looking at.
So they believe the shots came from that apartment building that is now on the left side of your screen. Do you have a decent idea on where the sheriff's deputy was standing when he got hit?
We think that it was somewhere near that helipad where you see that circle in the parking lot. We can't really zoom into it, again, for the safety of the deputies on the ground. But that helipad right there is on the north end of the parking lot, and we believe it was somewhere around there where that deputy was struck. Now, presumably there were others in the parking lot as well. We heard that the shots were being fired at deputies, plural, but only one suffered a gunshot wound. The rest were able to seek safety. And when we first arrived on scene, we saw with our very own eyes lots of deputies scattering and running through that parking lot. Some were trying to seek hiding space. Others were actually looking for civilians who were reportedly trapped in their cars and were seeking shelter in their own personal vehicles in that parking lot.
When we first took you on that first hit on this breaking news during the Eyewitness News at 3 o'clock, I recall you showing a shot of sheriff's deputies, guns drawn. They were stopping cars in the street and searching, and at least trying to identify who's driving those cars. So I guess those were the early stages as they were trying to figure out what is going on, but making sure that they contain the traffic coming in and out of the area, making sure the gunman does not get out of this area. That is video on the right-hand side. Is that correct, or is that not correct? Okay, video on the right-hand side from earlier today, and you could see how aware the sheriff's deputies are. Their guns are drawn. They're basically pointing in every which direction because they have no idea where the gunman is. It's a very complicated, confusing, precarious situation for them as they try to figure this thing out. But that shows you the stress level that they were dealing with just about 40 minutes ago when it comes to trying to figure this whole thing out. Again, video from that parking lot. So, Chris, you captured some rather amazing footage of kind of the confusion as they're trying to figure this thing out, but you could also get an idea of the wide range of space that they're dealing with.
Yes, a large area that we're talking about between Jackman Street and Lancaster Boulevard. We did manage to make it up here pretty soon after this all started. You're looking at about a quarter-mile area, though, as you can see from our SkyMap7 technology that they are working within just to the west of Sierra Highway. A huge area, but that apartment complex just by itself is a rather large building, as we've been able to tell, and they are bringing in every asset at their disposal, including drones. We've got 2 helicopters orbiting the scene here. There's a sniper team, an airborne sniper team that's now being flown up here from Los Angeles. You also have an enormous presence on the ground with black and whites lining the entire neighborhood, locking this area down and making sure everybody is accounted for, making sure their own personnel are safe, and making sure that they are ready to move into position as necessary once they have the clearance to do so. You have to also understand that the fire department is standing by. They can't get into that apartment building until law enforcement gives the okay and declares a code 4. So lots of personnel up here, lots of resources at the disposal, and many assets being moved into place for what is expected to be an extended operation up here in Lancaster.
Well, you see at the bottom of your screen that freight train that just passed by, but keep in mind that the Metrolink, they are completely shut down in this area. It's pretty much locked down this entire area. It's going to paralyze this particular part of Lancaster for quite some time. But yeah, no Metrolink running right now.
Yeah, that's a major deal. When folks if you need to travel through Lancaster, check your schedule and check in with Metrolink, because you may not be able to get through this area. This is going right along Sierra Highway. We see those tracks. We just saw a freight train going by there. But there's also tracks for Metro as well. That Metro link is shut down. As this search continues, I know you don't want to show a whole lot of information when it comes to maneuvers by the Sheriff's Department, but have you noticed a number? We saw SWAT show up. Have you noticed a number of other officers showing up from other departments?
I have not. We have not been able to see that. The only thing that we can confirm is that they have entered the building. So we do understand that law enforcement has entered the building, and they have begun that search for the shooter, and presumably will start meticulously evacuating the residents that they can get to in that building. So that operation is underway here. The search is well underway, and especially with those SCB units now in place, they've been driven over, and they will make entry into those third and fourth floor window, south-facing window apartments any minute now.
Such a tricky situation, because the shooter could be anywhere in that building and could have already gotten rid of the weapons. So that's going to be really difficult to ascertain who their suspect is.
Oh, look, there's more units showing up as well.
More units rolling into the neighborhood, a command post being set up. I'm not exactly sure of the cross street where that could, so that's going to be Gadsden Street and Kildare Street. So that's where they are setting up shop for the evening, and you can see lots of law enforcement already on the scene down there. A command post now being staged. A triage area has also been set up in case that is necessary. If there are additional gunshot wound victims or injured, they will be taken to the triage area, which is nearby, and a number of ambulances, you'll notice, have also been moved into place from other parts of Lancaster and even Palmdale, moving into position here.
Wow. Quite an undertaking, and keep in mind it's 105 degrees there in Lancaster.
Very hot day, and a lot of folks who are being evacuated from their buildings, they're going to have to stand in that hot sun, which is a tough situation for them. Getting back to the actual scene of the shooting by the Lancaster Sheriff's Department, you could see the hard pull from there, so it's a little bit of ways away, and there's the scene. The apartment complex we've been talking about is there on the right-hand side, that white building, and then the parking lot that Chris is over right now. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, we're just watching as the sheriff's deputy helicopter continues to orbit and communicate with the officers on the ground. That is the building in question right there, that U-shaped building. We're continuing to keep a really close eye, even from this distance, as we try and protect the location of the tactical officers involved in this search. We can just, take in the area that we're dealing with, that they are dealing with down there, and how chaotic this must have been in the moments after that initial shooting for anybody in that parking lot. Thank goodness it was only one casualty, and thank goodness he's expected to be okay. This obviously could have been much worse, if indeed it is what it sounds like, which sounds like somebody picking off pedestrians in that parking lot. Here comes the first Bearcat that's arrived here in Lancaster. There are additional on the way. It's taking a while to get into position, upwards of 45 minutes, but now finally the first signs of cavalry arriving here in terms of armored vehicles making their way into the scene here.
All right, so the Bearcat is arriving. They probably had to drive that thing in rush hour traffic from some other location, so that's probably accounts for the time to get there. Chris, I'm curious about this other big complex down there with the trees around it, multicolored. It's right there to the side of the parking lot. Yeah, what is that? And for the viewers who are just tuning in, and could that be somehow involved in any of this?
It doesn't look like it. That's actually a museum. I believe. It's actually, there's a senior, actually, where the trees are right there is a senior apartment complex. This is a senior apartment complex with senior citizens and then a museum right next door. You'll notice that along Beach Avenue, there is a whole contingent of LA County Sheriff's deputies providing some protection because that would be technically in the line of fire from where that initial shot came from. Again, all coming from that building at the north, which is that U-shaped building on the top right-hand corner, and the gunfire was pointed south towards that sheriff's station, which would also be in the direction of that senior citizens apartment complex. So we haven't seen any evacuations, but certainly lots of law enforcement keeping folks back and trying to contain these various properties. Again, there's a museum. You've got a church right next door near the top of your screen, the school where the helicopter landed on the top right-hand corner where those baseball fields are. All of this coming into play here as they lock down this neighborhood.
And even when they do go methodically door to door through the building eventually, those people cannot even leave in their cars because it puts them at risk. They're right there in the parking lot. So they're going to have to find a place for all these people to go.
They have completed. I don't think they've given the all clear yet, but they have done at least a preliminary grid search of that parking lot with other deputies providing cover, making sure nobody's looking at the south side of the U-shaped apartment complex, which, by the way, is the Arborfield apartment building, which is the building where the shooter's believed to be hiding out. They have gone and cleared the rest of the cars by now. So there were reports again in the moments after the shooting of folks hiding out in the back seat of their cars, their personal vehicles, many of them who actually work at the sheriff's station. So we're talking about crime scene technicians, secretaries, administrative assistants. You've got other deputies of various ranks, all who work in that sheriff's station. And that parking lot by now appears to have been cleared out. The only people left there are going to be tactical officers who are surrounding that apartment building.
Okay.
Well, we're trying to get confirmation on what exactly happened, how many shots were fired, but the more shots that were fired, and we're hoping there is only one casualty involved in this case, but as the shooter shoots repeatedly, that does give deputies an opportunity to get a better gauge on where the shots were coming from. So if it's accurate that the shooter shot a number of times at that parking lot, that does give witnesses and deputies a bit of a more accurate gauge on where the gunshots are coming from. So them saying that that's complex right there is the source of the gunfire, it might be pretty accurate because multiple shots were fired, at least from what we are hearing. But when it comes to official statements on what exactly happened, we don't have anything just yet.
That's right. We're surmising a bit, but you're right. They're being very tight-lipped. They don't exactly have a good handle on, what the motive is here. Obviously, they don't have, as far as we could tell, any intelligence on the suspect himself. And so they are dealing with limited information themselves. They just know that a gunman was firing out of one of those windows, and that presumably is coming from the injured officer who was shot. I could also tell you that the Metrolink tracks are Metrolink services come to a halt between Palmdale and Lancaster Boulevard due to this search that's taking place. You mentioned Metrolink service being suspended. Basically, every train out of Palmdale is now being held in Palmdale. So again, all part of the process of locking down this entire vicinity. Fortunately, on the other side of the tracks appears to be mostly commercial space, a fairly safe distance away along Yucca Avenue, some industrial buildings, but nobody that really appears to be in harm's way on the other side of the tracks. But again, probably a wise idea to halt train service. You can see there are deputies that have made their way to the other side of the tracks just in case, but probably a good idea on the part of Metrolink to suspend service until they can clear this building.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I'm reading about that apartment building. It's built in 2008. It has 99 units. So, yeah, quite a massive undertaking.
We want to remind everybody that we are shooting this really wide intentionally. We don't want to give away details or tactics of what law enforcement is doing, just in case, in this day and age, it's not just a television, but on your smartphone as well. You could watch some of the maneuvers. If you are the actual gunman, we don't want to tip him or her with some of the specific details of what law enforcement is doing down there. So we're keeping it wide. We're showing you generally what is happening. We could show you more, but we're not going to do that because it certainly puts law enforcement in danger. Just to give you, and we'll remind you of this, but just to give you an idea on why we're shooting it in this way.
Yeah, there's a lot of personnel down there. In fact, when we first arrived on scene, we saw, virtually every corner that you look down, there were already, even in the immediate moments following the shooting, deputies taking cover, taking a position around the building, and looking for places to, get a clear view, but still remain hidden from the suspect, at least from the view of any of those windows. When you're dealing with a shooter elevated on an upper floor of a building like this, it really does complicate things. You think back to the Las Vegas shooting last year out of the Mandalay Bay, where you had a shooter shooting from a very high hotel tower. This is obviously not that situation. It's a much lower rise building, but we are still dealing with a shooter on the third or fourth, maybe even the fifth floor. I think it's a 5-story building altogether, but maybe it was only 4 stories. I'm not sure. We'll have to go back and count. But there again is the staging area where you could see just in the last few minutes since we last peeked over here, numerous law enforcement continuing to stack up in that parking lot.
Right. Good point when it comes to the Vegas shooter, because if you talk to the crowd that was at that concert in Las Vegas at the beginning, they heard what they thought was loud fireworks and then bullets were flying, but they had no idea where they were coming from. So it caused some mass confusion. And sometimes the higher a gunman is, obviously the high ground is what they call it. And you have definitely an advantage there because it's harder to find you, yet you could see everybody and everything. So that's part of the confusion here, is figuring out specifically where the gunman was, and hopefully he is at least where they think he is. Hopefully he is somewhere in that vicinity so they can narrow it down and get to him quickly. But as Ellen pointed out, there are a bunch of apartments in that building, close to 100, and that's a lot of families.
Yeah, and while it's too soon to say for sure, the hope is that because of the proximity to the sheriff's station, which is literally a couple hundred yards away, hopefully there were enough deputies who were able to move into position right away and prevent that suspect from actually managing to escape that apartment building. And that's why they appear convinced. I say they appear because we don't know for sure, but they appear convinced that the shooter is held up in that building, somewhere on that property. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of concern yet of that suspect managing to escape the area.
Right. All right. Chris, if you could stand by 1 second. We did manage to get some sound. What we're about to play for you is some of the radio traffic for the Sheriff's Department right after the shooting took place. As you listen in, we believe that the person who was shot, the deputy who was shot, is on this recording, but we can't say that for sure. That has not been confirmed, but we will play it for you so you can get a sense of what was happening at that time. So let's listen to this.
Take a shot from the north of the Lancaster helipad. See him hitting the right shoulder. They might have got there, but from the apartment complex to the north, I got 2 shots go out. My shooter ripped to the right. Thank you, sir. Have you guys up with the same?
Units responding with the Lancaster helipad.
All right, I wasn't able to catch everything. Right. Did you catch it?
No, it's pretty tough.
It's a little garbled there, but it does sound like he did say shots. He was shot in the shoulder. The shots were coming from the apartment complex. We'll try to play that for you again in just a second, but it's pretty clear though that he is under duress, but remarkably calm.
Right.
And you got to ask yourself, could you be that calm if you just got shot out of nowhere? So it's a pretty remarkable recording.
And thank goodness it hit his shoulder. You think about how close that is to being a fatal accident.
Yeah.
And
in fact, so let's listen to this one more time. I didn't grab it all the first time, so let's listen one more time.
Take a shot from the north of the Lancaster helipad. See him hitting the right shoulder. They might have got there, but from the apartment complex to the north, I got 2 shots go out. My shooter ripped to the right. Thank you, sir. Have you guys up with the same?
responder to Lancaster helipad.
Did it sound like 2 shots fired? Hit his right shoulder.
Right in the right shoulder, north of the helipad, it sounds like you said. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so I can help you out a little bit with that. He was basically, from what I heard there, sounds like he identified 2 gunshots coming from the apartment complex. He was clearly near that helipad, which is where we've been focusing our attention, which is basically in the middle between the sheriff's station and the apartment complex. He was somewhere around there in the parking lot. Not sure if he was on the north side of the helipad or on the south side. You can see that helipad, even though it looks really small as we widen out here, it's actually a rather large piece of concrete there where a large helicopter can land. So he was in that vicinity, and he immediately called for a containment on the north side of that helipad, which is what I was referencing just before we went to that tape. So imagine there were probably at least a dozen units in the area, between units that were nearby plus the deputies inside that sheriff's station, who were able to jump into action and immediately start containing that apartment complex just south of Jackman Street and just to the west of Sierra Highway. They probably had enough time to block those exits and entrances relatively quickly, which is why we're not dealing with a more massive search here. It's all confined to that apartment building because they were able to get him to position so quickly. And if he only heard 2 gunshots, which is what it sounded like he said, he heard 2 gunshots. He said he was injured in the shoulder and immediately called for containment. So that's what I gathered from that call there. Obviously, thank goodness he was able to make that radio call, because without that radio call, you can imagine it would have been even more chaos, more unknowns, to deal with for the responding officers.
Right.
And the shooter could have gotten away as well.
And
that's right. This is a sniper team that's actually in this A-Star here. That's a Sheriff's Department helicopter. You can see they are now circling the apartment building. So we have an airborne sniper on scene down here. There's also a drone system that's about to be deployed, I believe, and just an enormous response by all of the county resources.
Yeah, and these guys, again, they are highly trained, very talented snipers if we ever need their assistance. So they are circling overhead. There is a little bit of transcription from that communication, that broadcast. Even so, though, it's still hard to tell. From the transcription that we have, it says, "I have taken shots from the north of the Lancaster helipad, hitting the right shoulder.
How much?
From the apartment complex up north, heard 2 shots off, shirts ripped." That's what we can make out from that so far. Yeah, 2 shots. So that might, with those 2 shots, hopefully he was able to kind of zero in on where those are coming from. But north of the helipad, that apartment complex that they are now concentrating on. And then when we took that shot during 3 o'clock, you saw them blocking traffic, stopping cars from driving, looking in the car, making sure that it's not the gunman trying to get away. But chaotic scene, especially in the initial minutes right after the shooting began. Now it's calmed down. Now it's an intricate process of just meticulously looking through the building very carefully and trying to narrow down where the gunman is and also keep all the people safe who are still in that building and basically on lockdown.
And this situation seems like a really good time to use the drone. They can just get up close to the window and not put people at risk.
Right.
So that'll be interesting to see how they do that.
Law enforcement is using the drones more and more, and it's not a human being that's put at risk. Plus, the drone could reach elevation. And technology now, cameras are so good. In fact, really small cameras, they're so crisp and sharp that you could really push in and see detail. And it's a real valuable tool that we're just beginning to start to use. But obviously, the applications are pretty enormous when it comes to keeping law enforcement safe, yet giving them eyes and locations where it's just too dangerous to put a human in. So I don't see, there's almost no traffic going through there. Clearly everything is blocked, Chris, when it comes to coming in or getting out of this entire area.
This entire section of Lancaster has basically been frozen. You can see there from Sierra Highway, from Lancaster, even points south, but they do have some tape now that's going up. We can identify some tape. So at least everything to to the west of Sierra Highway for sure is shut down. Avenue I is getting through, but Jackman Street is shut down. I believe Avenue I is the first major street north of Jackman that is open. So we're talking about Sierra Highway at Avenue I is where people are now getting home. Lancaster Boulevard shut down. We'll try and get the next street to the south that's open. That's going to probably be Avenue J. I would presume. Yeah, it looks like Avenue J is open. So from Avenue J north, while there is some traffic there, I don't think you're going to be able to get all the way up to Lancaster Boulevard. Basically, an entire section of the city shut down, and to a large extent, municipal buildings. But as we mentioned, there's a senior living facility, a museum, several schools, some churches, all in this shot right here that we're looking at. Everything pretty much to the west of Sierra Highway.
Okay, so if you are living in Lancaster, try to stay put. At least do not go through anywhere near this area, because it's going to be a huge problem for you to get through and get around. And I imagine traffic is probably building in some of the other areas due to the fact that this area is largely shut down.
And speaking of traffic, the Metrolink says that the line 226 to Los Angeles will originate in Palmdale. So if you take the 226 to Los Angeles, just keep in mind that Lancaster Metrolink completely closed down, but you can go into Palmdale and get it there.
Yeah, so that's going to be a big inconvenience for some people, but it's necessary to keep folks safe right now. We'll let you know, if you're just tuning in, that there is a lot of activity going on down below, but we're keeping our cameras wide because we don't want to give away any kind of tactical information. But the SEB, or the SWAT team for the Sheriff's Department, is down there. They're doing building checks right now. They're going through that apartment complex, which is roughly right in the center of your screen right there, the kind of U-shaped white building. It's a large building, and they believe that that is where the shots originated from. A couple of shots from there. That building where our arrow is pointing right now. So it's going to be a long process. 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like 5 stories, maybe 4 to 5 stories. Ellen, I'm not quite sure, but there's a lot of windows there.
A lot, yes.
A lot of floors and a lot of rooms that they're going to have to go through and carefully search through. And keep in mind, this gunman, he may be completely hidden. He may be trying to, kind of fade into everything else.
Hiding in plain sight. Yeah. He could have put the pistol or long rifle, whatever he used, anywhere in the ceiling.
Hide it somewhere. So they're going to have to deal with the complexities of that as well. It's not like he's going to be just obvious. He could, as you said, hide in plain sight. And they're going to have to figure out how to get through all of this information and locate that person. At the same time, deal with all these families who are scared, inconvenienced, and right now in harm's way.
Yeah, and I would also imagine that the first order of business, it's almost a little bit odd that we haven't heard anything yet regarding witnesses. The only witness account that we have is the actual deputy himself, the one who was injured. That radio call, that's really the extent of eyewitness account that we have. One has to wonder whether there was anybody inside the apartment complex that they've been able to communicate with that heard or saw something that could help the search. We haven't heard that yet, whether they've been able to access any witnesses who are providing information. Certainly, as you mentioned, they really can't let anybody out. They're going to have to form a containment area within the containment space and identify everybody very carefully, because they just don't know what the shooter looks like or what they're dealing with per se. But certainly there is a starvation for information, for intelligence gathering, so that they can find this person sooner rather than later. And that's going to come from anybody who heard or saw anything. Maybe somebody running down the hallway, maybe somebody who was acting odd in the moments prior to the shooting, that type of thing. So that's all information that they're going to be trying to gather relatively expeditiously, but we just haven't heard any traffic to that effect. We have not heard them gaining any of that intelligence just yet.
Yeah, but they for sure are gathering it. And, you're right. Witnesses, in the building, I'm sure, heard the shots. They could at least help guide the and sheriff's officials to where the noise came from.
Exactly, because someone had to hear it really loud, like maybe right next door or something.
If you're living next door to somebody who just fired off 2 rounds in a high-powered rifle, you're going to generally know it was within a few feet of you. So we're now showing you some video. Granted, all this video we have vetted. We're making sure that it doesn't give anything away. This on the right-hand side, that's the SEB team, the sheriff's SWAT team, that they landed in that school that's a few hundred yards away. And they quickly got off the helicopter, loaded up into cars, and were quickly taken to the apartment complex. Those are the guys that are now doing the search in that apartment complex, and that's the command center that has been set up. That is near where that school is as well. The Killdeer and Gadsden is basically the intersection. So they've quickly set up that command center, and it's a ways away from harm's way, but close enough to where they can get personnel in and out and keep people briefed. And then, of course, on the left-hand side, you see the helicopter. And Chris, is that the helicopter with the sniper on there?
Yeah, that is. There's a sniper on board that helicopter. There are additional shooters on the ground taking up position. And one of the things that they actually started in the moments immediately afterwards were getting guns trained from various vantage points on every single exterior window of that apartment building. They were trying to get a good look, especially on the south side where the gunfire came from. But now that they have kind of cleared the south side, they are going window by window, apartment by apartment, looking for any sign of unusual activity. And certainly you have the aerial resources as well, and certainly that drone will come into play, because that drone can get really close up and kind of go, it's a really amazing technology for a situation like this, where they can actually, in a short amount of time, peer inside each and every window in what would normally take hours to peek inside every apartment safely. So with the advent of drone technology, you're taking the human risk out of it and just providing drone cover with a camera looking inside each window. That's what they're going to start doing here. I don't think they've actually launched the drone yet, by the way, but that's what they are preparing to do. In addition, they have that sniper doing orbits around the building as well, and again, a number of sharpshooters around the building.
And that is a godsend, that drone technology for this type of situation.
Because of what we do, we study drone technology all the time, and just 3 to 4 years ago, the really good drones, they're really big, I would say like 4 feet across, and they would take 2 pilots in order to be able to carry the right kind of camera. In the last couple of years, technology has moved so quickly that a quality drone these days is no more than a foot across. It's able to maneuver its way. It has a very small camera, but a very good camera with high definition capability, 4K capability. And because of its size and the fact that it doesn't take 2 pilots but 1 pilot, I don't know the kind that the Sheriff's Department is using. I'm just saying what we would use in this industry. Drone technology has moved so quickly in the last 2 to 3 years to where they're much smaller, yet high quality, takes 1 really good pilot, and they could fly that thing into anywhere because it's so small. And that really is going to be a real advantage for them. I don't know the kind of drone that they're using. Quick note, Ron, our producer, I'm going to ask him, did we use all the video that we were cleared to use, or do we have more? We did use all the, okay. One more time, though, we do have that sound on tape of the broadcast, and we believe that this is the sheriff's deputy who was shot in the shoulder. This whole incident revolves around what happened to him. We believe this is the person, the sheriff's deputy who was shot. We captured it on this broadcast, so listen to this.
Take a shot from the north of the Lancaster helipad. See him here in the right shoulder. They might have got there, but from the apartment complex to the north, they got 2 shots go out. My shooter ripped to the right. Like I said, the units up with the same.
Units responded with the Lancaster helipad.
That was, it's fascinating to listen to that. It was at 2:53 p.m. at Sheriff's Station in Lancaster Boulevard. According to that, information, the Sheriff's Information Bureau, that deputy was wounded in the right shoulder. He was able to walk himself into the station in pretty stable condition. He was breathing, he was alert, and then they were able to take him to a nearby hospital. But thank goodness he was able to radio right away, because they could immediately get on it and start the perimeter search and stop people from coming in and out.
And he goes into the sheriff's headquarters, which is loaded with deputies, so they could immediately get on this and don't even have to respond because they're already there. We talked to the mayor, who actually saw him in the emergency room, says he's in a great deal of pain, and I'm not sure if that is a live picture or not, but okay, so we have, those are live pictures, and let's get to Veronica Miracle. I understand that she has arrived on the scene now, and she's gathering as much information as she can get, even though this is a very fluid situation. So, Veronica, what do you have for us?
Yeah, David, I'm here with Mayor R. Rex Parris. You just came from the hospital where you had a chance to speak with the deputy. Please let our viewers know what's going on right now at the hospital.
Well, he's in a lot of pain, but he's going to be okay. He took a bullet right about here, but he had his vest on, and so it reflected, deflected up and entered his shoulder. But we expect him maybe one night.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. Was he able to tell you what exactly happened? We understand there's an all-out manhunt right now to find his shooter.
He was telling other deputies what happened. I was not his biggest concern. He was in a great deal of pain at the time.
Oh, definitely. What can you tell us about the investigation that's going on right now, and to the people of this community, what they're seeing and hearing?
Well, we've got hundreds of deputies here, it seems like. The sheriff just arrived. We got the SEB team, which is the SWAT team. They're surrounding the building. They think he's still in the building, but, they're looking all over to make certain. Hopefully, well, I don't want to say what I hope. Okay.
Definitely a troubling time. Can you tell us about the buildings that surround the sheriff's station and what exactly are the businesses that surround that sheriff's station?
Well, there's a lot of businesses, but what you're specifically asking about is there's Mental Health America, which is to the north of the sheriff's station. Between it and the sheriff's station is a apartment complex, which is for mentally disabled people. Meaning with mental health issues. Now, who decided to put a 4-story building that looks down onto the parking lot of that particular type there? I mean, it's beyond my comprehension. But nobody's surprised this happened, to be quite frank with you. Maybe we now have an ability to close it.
Does this feel like it was a targeted attack specifically on this one deputy, or?
No, it was not targeted on this specific deputy. It was any deputy will do. This particular deputy is a trainee who, recently arrived at the station. There's no reason to believe in any way, shape, or form that it was directed at him.
What else can you tell us about the deputy? You said he's a trainee. Is he a younger man?
Well, to me, he looks like a kid. I mean, it's distressing to see somebody that age on that gurney knowing he had just been shot. And quite frankly, it happened because of incompetence in government allowing that facility to be there in the first place.
Have there been any issues prior to this there?
Well, there's always issues, but nothing of this magnitude.
Okay. Anything else that you can tell us, and anything else you want to say to community members who are watching this?
Well, it's contained. We're going to get him. They may arrest him. We'll know in probably an hour or so. They're safe in the city of Lancaster right now. Stay out of the downtown area. You're just going to get in the way if you come down.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you so much, Mayor, for your time. I know you're very busy right now. We appreciate it. David will send it back to you guys in the studio.
Veronica, thank you very much. Well, we've heard from him twice, and like all of us, we still have yet to find out any motive or who this person is or any intel on this particular suspect.
But it's interesting that the mayor does believe that apartment complex is a bit of a liability in this area. I'm sure there will be some analysis on that. He seems to point out that some of the folks that live there might be an issue in this particular place. But that is probably some analysis that will take place after what we're dealing with here, and that is the search for the gunman and how it's affecting the other people who live in that building who are told to shelter in place while the SWAT team searches that extremely large building looking for the source of the gunfire which they believe came from that building.
And we believe there's 99 apartment units in that building, so it's quite an undertaking, and including an underground garage and so multiple things that are taking place at the same time. Right, we're looking at Chris Christie's picture from Air 7. Looks like another Bearcat, Chris.
Yeah, additional Bearcats pulling up here, more resources arriving on scene. I think it was notable that the mayor kind of confirmed there that they do think that the suspect is still in that building. There does not seem to be a concern, which is something we have thought for a long time now up here, but that seemed to confirm that they are not looking beyond the walls of that building. It certainly appears that they have the suspect confined to that space. Now, again, the big concern now is for other people inside that building, and of course, how do they find that suspect with all of the hiding spots in a building that large? It's going to be an extended operation, but they have time on their side, and they have lots of resources at their disposal here. The biggest priority is obviously the safety of the other residents inside that building. Of course, when we first arrived on scene, I would say everybody in this shot that we're looking at right here was in danger. But now it certainly appears that this is certainly confined to this building, and that's likely because of that radio call by that injured officer who was able to call for a containment area to be set up in the seconds after the shooting.
Yeah, it's fortuitous that it was right next to the sheriff's station, and I guess good and bad, because according to the mayor, he had problems with that particular apartment complex and perhaps, some at-risk people that might be living in there, according to him. And so it was thankfully that he could reach by radio the rest of the sheriff's department. I
think during his phone interview with us, he said he felt a situation like this was inevitable. And then he reconfirms with Veronica Miracle, who just did the interview with him, that he's not happy about the fact that that apartment complex is there and who's living in it in that specific proximity.
Right. So
we continue to hover overhead. That's a live picture. Again, we're staying wide. We don't want to give away specifics on maneuvers by the sheriff's deputies that have this entire area basically cordoned off, surrounded. They're searching for a gunman they believe is in that apartment complex right in the middle. So this is some video we can show you, and this is the SEB team arriving at a nearby school, landing in their open field, and then quickly getting off the craft, and then they're going to gear up and basically hop into some cars that quickly drive them a few hundred yards to that apartment complex. There they are. They're hopping off. So this is the SEB team, also known as a SWAT team, considered one of the best SWAT teams in the world. Highly trained group of guys. The last I heard, they have about 40 members. Perhaps it's a little bit more than that. And they are trained with everything from sniping to being snipers to explosives to obviously room clearing, etc. They're very, very good, efficient law enforcement personnel. They're very qualified to do the work that lies ahead of them when it comes to clearing this building. Then again, that is the command center that has been set up at Gadsden and Kildare. That is a few hundred yards away from that live picture where you see the apartment complex right in the middle. So the command center a few hundred yards away, where the SWAT team landed a few hundred yards away. But that is the concern right there, that building in the middle. And you see that parking lot to the right-hand side, and you see a circle. That is a helipad. And you may remember that in that broadcast that we captured, the sheriff's deputy was standing somewhere near that helipad when he was shot. It's saying the shots were coming from north of the helipad. There's this school where you see that's the helicopter that dropped off the SWAT team. That school nearby as well. So this entire area affected by this shooting.
So everything on lockdown, including Metrolink. You can't get through there through the Lancaster area. You have to make other arrangements for that. Also, a couple tweets from the Lancaster Sheriff's Department and Carson. It said that we are, if you're in the area surrounding the Lancaster Sheriff's Department, please follow all the instructions given by law enforcement. Avoid that area. They're telling you, everybody, to just avoid that area entirely.
Okay, so I'm getting some information here. This is some tweets about Lancaster. First of all, from the LA Sheriff's Department. Carson Station. Oh, okay. Sorry about that, Ellen. Let's see. The media is also gathering at specifically the City Hall.
Right. These are little, it's to decipher all these different tweets here. But they're saying, media availability at City Chamber City Chamber office at Lancaster City Hall. That's where Veronica Miracle was talking to the to the mayor, excuse me.
Right. So that's where we're trying to get organized on where we're going to start getting information. I imagine usually with a big situation like this, they're going to start hopefully giving us some briefings on the information that they know. But in a fluid situation like this, perhaps they don't know a whole lot, especially when it comes to the gunman. The big question is, nobody has seen him. Shots rang out. That's all they know. They believe it came from the apartment complex, but nobody actually saw the gunman, what he was using, or even where it was coming from outside of that giant building that they're going to be searching right now.
Right, and those shots were at 2:53 this afternoon, so I haven't heard anything since then. And now they're going to have to go through that entire apartment complex and find this person who could be just hiding in plain sight. We don't know he or she. Obviously, we don't know the suspect, but it's going to be a long night for everybody there.
Mm-hmm. So there will be some, obviously, a lot of questions being asked of the residents in that apartment complex, what they saw, what they heard. Perhaps somebody knows something or at least heard something so they could narrow down where they came from, perhaps maybe even narrow it down to where the specific place where they came from. Obviously, when the shots are fired, if it's a ways away, it echoes, you don't really know where it comes from. But if the shots are fired very near you, you have a pretty good idea on exactly where it came from.
Good point. And we're also awaiting the use of the drone that they could use to look inside all the windows of those apartment complexes, apartment buildings, and find out if they can locate anybody.
We don't know yet if that is up and moving. We hope it is, but they're bringing in whatever they have, whatever tools they have in order to kind of get to the bottom of this. Also, we're getting word that there might be a press briefing of some sort, perhaps from the mayor. There it is. I think they're preparing at least to get some statement from the mayor himself in about 10 minutes is what I understand. Obviously, there you see Veronica Miracle. She is standing by for that. She just interviewed the mayor. I'm not sure if he's going to say additional information or he's going to basically talk about what he's already talked about with us a couple of times today.
Right, and we're going to continue following this. Eyewitness News at 5 o'clock is coming up in just a couple of minutes. But, we're going to stay on top of this and continue to watch, and hopefully they will get their suspect sooner rather than later. But it is going to be a big undertaking.
As we continue live over the scene, that is a picture of what we've been dealing with. The parking lot to the right-hand side, there is a circle. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a helipad. And the deputy was near that circle in that parking lot there, where he says the gunshots were coming from north of that helipad, that circle, from that building near the middle top of your screen, that big, large complex. That's the apartment complex in question. From what we understand, at least from what we can decipher from the broadcast, was that 2 shots were fired out of that building. One of them hit him in his shoulder. He's going to survive, but is said to be in a great deal of pain. The mayor actually visited him in the emergency room. He says the jacket, the flak jacket or bulletproof vest, it bounced off of that and went up. And I don't know if that means it went up and penetrated him, perhaps broke a collarbone. We don't know, but he's in a great deal of pain. However, the vest, I'm sure, perhaps saved his life and at least kept his vital organs safe from the shots. A second shot rang out. It didn't hit anybody from what we understand. We don't believe that there are any other victims that we know of. But as a result, it was chaos for a little while because nobody knew where the shots were coming from. Quickly, the sheriff's department had to get everybody available to get out and start canvassing the area. We saw them stopping cars, searching cars. Everybody had guns drawn, pointing in different directions because it wasn't clear on where the shots were coming from. So that brings us basically to where we are right now. The sheriff's deputy is said to be, he's going to be okay. He's at the hospital. The SWAT team has landed at a nearby elementary school. They are searching that building right now with a decent amount of confidence that that is the building where the shots have come from. And in the meantime, it's a waiting game. Many of the buildings in this area, in that shot that you see right now, are locked down with people inside. There were even people hiding in their cars. Hopefully they're out now. It's a very hot day, a very uncomfortable day at that. So you've been watching Eyewitness News at 4 o'clock. We're preparing to get to Eyewitness News at 5 with Michelle Tuzzi and Mark Brown. Michelle, you in?
I'm in. David, Ellen, thank you very much. As we begin Eyewitness News at 5, I'm here with Mark Brown, and we are covering breaking news: a deputy shot and a gunman at large in what appears to have been some kind of a sniper attack on a deputy. It happened in Lancaster this afternoon. Authorities are still working to find that gunman, who seems to be somewhere inside this large building. At the top of your screen, it's a U-shaped white building at the corner of Sierra Highway and West Jackman Street. It seems to be a mental health complex that has residential units in it as well, a place that offers counseling and mental health services. It is also very close to a Lancaster Sheriff's Station. We don't know how the deputy came upon this situation, if he was just patrolling the area and was targeted. We are waiting more information about how the shooting occurred, but we can tell you that a deputy was shot by someone from inside that building, and that gunman has still not been found. We're looking at live pictures now from Air 7 HD, and you can see the huge law enforcement presence there on the scene. Let's go now to a news conference. This is being held by the mayor of Lancaster. Let's listen in.
Was I on the air when I... We're live now? So you would just...
All right, that's the mayor of Lancaster. He spoke with our Veronica Miracle
Earlier
minutes
today,
ago.
a sniper from Mental Health America facility took a shot at one of our deputies and hit him in the chest. He fortunately was wearing a vest. The vest saved his life, but the bullet did deflect into his shoulder. I saw him at the emergency room probably within 20 minutes of the event, and he was talking. They expected that he will be fine. He was in a great deal of pain, obviously. Right now, they contained the building. They think the suspect is still in the apartment complex. The apartment complex is a facility for people with mental health problems. So obviously it's a very difficult tactical situation for the Sheriff's Department. They responded incredibly fast. We've got well over 100 deputies on the scene now, and I expect he'll either be taken into custody or it'll be resolved some other way within a short period of time.
What do we know about the suspect?
Nothing. We don't have race, we don't have gender, we don't have age, we don't have anything.
Is that posing a problem as you're looking through the building trying to find this person?
I could only imagine. I could only imagine. It's a very difficult tactical problem. I'm sure they'll get there, but it is a problem.
Tell us about the building, if there's any kind of security set up or anything to patrol and see if there are guns coming in and out of the building.
The building is a government-subsidized building for people with mental health issues, but it's not secure. It doesn't have any, there's no control of who's in, who's out. This is just where people live who have mental health problems. Unfortunately, the location of it is less than desirable. Now, what we do about that after this situation is resolved, that will be a series of meetings, I'm sure. My understanding, there's still people in the building.
What do we know about the deputy being shot?
You know, young guy. I mean, I saw him in the emergency room. To me, he looked like a kid. But, you know, I'm a little different age than him. He was talking. He's going to be okay. I mean, he just took a bullet. He was in a lot of pain, and they hadn't given him pain medication yet. He was telling the other deputies what he saw, what he heard.
What did he see in here?
Not much. I mean, he's walking out of the sheriff's station, and a sniper took a shot at him. That's what happened. It is incomprehensible that that sort of thing is happening in our city. Well, there's not any danger to the rest of the citizens at this point. The sheriff's department has it under very good control. It's just a problem. I mean, it's an inconvenience at this time as they seal everything off in order to catch this guy. But they will catch him, and it will bring it to an end by the end of the day. I have not heard that, and had I heard that, I mean, if that were the case, I would have heard it. And so, no, I'm confident he's in the building.
Seen video of officers and helicopters, so many people from SWAT, different agencies coming together to help them assist. How many people do you think are out there trying to fix that?
When I left the command center, I was thinking maybe 100 deputies. FBI was there, Highway Patrol was there. You know, everybody that could have any assistance at all was there. They have ambulances ready. They have a fire truck ready. They're getting ready to do what they have to do. It's not going to be pretty, but it's necessary.
Anything to expect tonight or final words?
Well, I think he'll be in custody by the end of the day. I would not expect this to go on into the evening hours, but anything's possible at this point. You know, it's difficult to be a mayor in a city in today's age. I mean, how many of these things do we need? We're blessed in the fact that nobody got killed. Other mayors are having much more serious problems. It's a difficult situation. Okay. Done. Thank you.
That was R. Rex Paris, the 4-term mayor of the city of Lancaster. He has been in public life there since the mid-2000s and being very adamant about his feelings about the building from where it's believed these shots came, and also about his feelings about what will end up happening. He also, it's worth pointing out the presence of mind that this young deputy showed. He's a trainee, but he was true to his training in that, you know, he was not just a victim, he was also a sheriff's deputy here, and he had to phone in or let the folks know at dispatch where he believed the shots were coming from, so that other deputies who were responding to this incident could deal with it in a way that protected their safety. So it's really indicative of the presence of mind of this young individual. This young man who was having suffered a gunshot was able to say approximately where it came from and to kind of look out for that area. Having said that, the mayor's very adamant about this building, this Mental Health America building, and the apartment complex that's right next to it, that he says is uncontrolled. It's not clear if it's been a source of trouble in that community for a long time, or whether there's some sort of opposition that he is displaying toward it that goes beyond any sort of safety concerns. We're not sure about that, but he was certainly very quick to single it out and say that is the problem here. But what we know is what we know, which is 2 shots were fired. One of them hit that sheriff's deputy in the chest. His vest deflected the bullet, apparently, up into his shoulder. So the vest clearly, it appears, saved his, if it didn't save his life, it certainly made sure that his internal organs were not hit by this bullet, and then deflected the bullet into his shoulder. He is in a great deal of pain, but he is talking, he is conscious, and is expected to survive and recover. Meanwhile, the response, as you can see, Michelle, is massive. It's huge. We've been watching on the right side of our screen video from earlier when a helicopter landed with some special teams, specially equipped teams to deal with situations like these. With special weapons. They're kind of similar to a SWAT team, but with the sheriff's department. They're on scene, as well as a helicopter that we're told has a sniper team in it, and they have been able to get down low and get a good look inside many of the windows of that building to try to find where those shots may have been fired from, or were fired from, actually. They know it originated from that building. That the sniper was somewhere inside that U-shaped large white building that you're seeing there. It's called the Mental Health America facility, and it's at the corner of Sierra Highway and West Jackman Street. And then just down the street,
Just south of that is the Lancaster Sheriff's Station. So according to the mayor, the deputy who was injured was just coming outside of that sheriff's station when he was hit. So it wasn't like he was out necessarily patrolling this area. He was just coming out of the building and was hit by a sniper. And the parking lot behind this facility has now become filled with law enforcement vehicles, and we're awaiting now word of what's happening with the scene and if this person has yet been caught.
Right, and we're keeping our shot wide. You might be wondering at home, why aren't they zooming in? Why aren't they showing more of the movements? And the reason